A very good day to you. I'm Howard Feldman, and this is the Synthesis Podcast. This is a subject today very close to my heart. It's all about coaching. Joining me this morning is Synthesis Director Jake Shepherd, who I know is very passionate about this. Ian Bessarabia, who is also somebody who lives this coaching mentality, and a conversation that I greatly look forward to having. Trying to understand really what is the value of coaching. What does it mean within a corporate environment? Is there a place for it? Can it be imposed? What do we hope to achieve by all of this? Jake Shepherd, I want to start with you because this coaching concept certainly has been around at Synthesis for some years in various forms. How did it all begin?
Yes, so Howard, it's actually a very good question. It actually began with me trying to understand what it is that makes effective people within an organization, and trying to actually articulate that and identify it and actually say and come to a realization that an organization is only as effective as the people in the organization. So if you want to build a great company, you have to build great people and let the people actually build a great company. And when you realize that personal growth is not just professional growth. It's not just about do you have the skills and can you apply those skills. It's also about personal growth. It's how well do you actually interact with people and have conversations. And I mean, my personal growth actually started with somebody recommending to me many years ago, Jake, I think you need to read a book called Crucial Conversations. And I didn't realize that in some ways it was a very helpful criticism of where I was at that stage in my life. And I didn't realize how badly I needed those skills. And I needed those skills not just in my professional life and in terms of working with people and managing people, but I actually needed it also in my personal life. How to hold those difficult conversations when your emotions are running high and things are actually, there's a lot at stake and you don't necessarily agree with the person that you're having this argument with. And then how to do it in such a way that actually you use the argument or you use that situation to actually further the relationships. And when I realized how transformative that was for myself and in terms of my career and in terms of my just general well-being and family life, I realized that actually the more people we can actually take through that journey, the better off we'll all be and the company will be. So that was really the genesis of my journey.
So interestingly enough, for anyone who doesn't know, your background is very, very much engineering based. Therefore, this whole field, and now we're sitting and having this conversation around coaching as though it's something that is absolutely been part of you your whole life, actually isn't a reality. This became something and a very deliberate journey that you went on.
Yes, so very much so. It was recognizing the fact that there was a lack. So as you correctly pointed out, my entire life up until then had been fixated on working with things, programming computers, building
easier
systems.
To understand.
Yeah. And then you recognize the fact that actually it's equally as important to build people because people are the ones who build the systems. And unless you're building effective people, unless you're helping people to become the most effective versions of themselves, you're missing an entire, you're missing one of the most important, or being able to tap into one of the most important, let's say, call it assets that a company has, which is the potential latent in the people within the company. And to the extent that you can tap into that and you can grow that and you can bring that to the fore, that's how effective the company can be. And it's recognizing that and the need for that.
And it's also interesting, but logical now that I'm hearing what you're saying, that this whole coaching approach is being implemented in a software, in a technology company, not in a HR company, in a, I don't know, something in media where you've got to connect with people or education, but actually there's a tremendous value even within a technology company, maybe even more so.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, I suppose, to a large extent, we didn't really. Yes, I've got certain ideas, but because we're a technology company and we're not necessarily totally focused around people and people growth, so you need to reach out to others and get actual external assistance when you're going to go through a coaching journey. And that's really where Ian started coming into the picture.
Right. So, Ian, that's a perfect segue to talk to you. You got involved with Synthesis on an external basis, have been running coaching programs for the teams. Give us your background and how you got involved in this field.
Howard, Jake has set it up very nicely, and he's put it into a great context. And I think the reinforcing point that Jake makes is it starts with you. It starts with the individual. And I think for me, the most fundamental aspect was trying to look for the solution in other people or in other aspects. And only later in my life, having spent 25 years or so in the corporate environment, I realized that the problems were actually with myself. And that's sometimes a very hard pill to swallow, is because you have to become aware of yourself. And that's very much where I started going on the coaching journey. And my coaching journey really was an introspective one, where I started looking and trying to understand myself better. And the most important thing that I learned about that is that nobody is the same. There's not one individual in this world that is equal. We're all unique, and that means we all come with our strengths, we all come with our weaknesses, and that's fine. But what happens is we set ourselves on such a high pedestal, we set such high standards that we can't achieve them, and then we always seem to fail. So the whole aspect of realizing that you do have weaknesses and challenges, and then understanding that you can't resolve those on your own, led me to realize that there's a lot of value in helping others. And there's also a lot of value in people feeling that it's okay to ask somebody to help them. And that's where the whole passion around coaching came in for me.
Right. So it's all about developing self. Is there, if I think about my background, and interestingly enough, we've all come to this, maybe not immediately. None of us started in that direction. But as a commodity trader for a number of years, obviously it was about people and understanding and developing young people. But a lot of the commodity environment really worked very hard to quell that. We didn't want people necessarily being in touch with exactly who they were. Maybe you could be in touch with who they were because that's how you could manipulate and maybe get the most out of them. But the world has changed, and we have started to see companies taking a lot more great strides in developing their people. What's your observation?
My observation is very much that if there's one positive thing that has come out of this pandemic, which we're all living through, is that it's just proved that things are not finite, that we're living in an infinite world where things are constantly changing, and we don't have control over certain things. So that whole, if you want to call it that historical corporate mentality around having the ability to control how people behave and how people operate in a working environment is pretty much gone, and it's not going to come back. And I foresee that any organization that tries to bring that mentality or that operating model back into the environment is going to be disappointed, because a lot of their people are not going to come back. They're going to resist. And why are they going to resist? Because they've been exposed and they've been given the confidence that they can do it a different way. They can be empowered and they can work independently and do things the way they feel comfortable to do. And I think it's a challenge. It's not an easy solution, and that's why it's so important. As Jake said earlier, it's so critical now to have those conversations, because if you don't start having those conversations, I think remote working will be a walk in the park compared to coming back to the work environment.
So that's interesting because, Jake, a conversation that you and I have often had is that Synthesis's success over this last period that Ian is talking about. We speak about agility, the fact that people are able to adapt, self-motivate, things like that. It doesn't just happen because you decide it. It happens because of years of laying a foundation that talks to a culture of agility, of the ability to adapt and to self-motivate. Talk to us about your approach to corporate culture.
Right, so let me just take one step back before I just address that. I think one of the hardest questions for people to ask themselves is, what do I want? And if you think about it, how often do we pause and say to ourselves, well, what is it that I actually want to achieve with my life? And I see coaching really as a forum to help people try and explore that. And then once you're exploring that, is to recognize what the company needs and what the company actually ultimately is striving for, how that can dovetail with my own personal life and what I want. So I think, in terms of corporate culture, corporate culture is really about creating the space for individuals to contribute, to rock up, show up, be at work, contribute their entire selves. And the way you do that is you align what the work is trying to achieve and what the business is trying to achieve with what that person's trying to achieve with their own life. And that's why it becomes so important to help people understand what it is that I would like to achieve, what it is that, how am I going to get there? What are the steps needed? And coaching is so important in helping people work out for themselves. Well, if that's really what I want, what steps do I take on a daily basis? And you can imagine that coach on the sideline with their team or with their players, urging them on and encouraging them. It's not about wisdom coming up from up high down to down to people. It's basically it's helping people tap into their aspirations and show and helping them understand how their aspirations can be met through a work environment and how they can achieve both. And when you actually get that synthesis, to use the pun, of a person's own personal aspirations together with the aspirations of what the business is trying to achieve, you automatically tap into that energy. You automatically tap into the fact that people are present. They've arrived. The motivation, it just comes from within, because what they're doing on a day-to-day resonates with what's actually their aspirations are. And I think that's the trick, is to try and actually starts with basically asking the question, what I want, and then helping people believe that they can achieve what they want. And
that Dolly Parton saying, find out who you are and then do it on purpose.
Yeah, agree with that.
So Ian, one of your tasks has been to train coaches. You're taking people essentially who have no experience in this field at all, and we're asking them to help others to find out who they are, so that they can do it on purpose, so to speak. How much of a challenge is that?
So Howard, it's an awesome challenge. Let me put it that way. And I know that might sound strange, but it's been an incredible journey. And the reason why it's been an incredible journey is because taking the people within Synthesis who are incredibly talented, incredibly focused on achieving their individual work goals, and now having to transition them into active listeners has been phenomenal. And the reason why I say that is because it's also very important to understand that coaching is not consulting and coaching is not counseling. Two very distinct other respective fields that are very important. And I think Synthesis, being a solution-based company, expects their people to show up and deliver solutions. And that's what Synthesis is great at. But being a coach means that sometimes you have to take off your consulting hat and your solutions hat, and you actually need to sit and listen to what the other person is saying. And it's not easy, because we often jump into that solution mode and say, okay, so Howard, that's your problem. Here's the solution. Go and fix it.
Like, it's so obvious.
With coaching, Absolutely. So with coaching, what we find is that coaching is effectively helping an individual to find their own solution. Very important, that is, find your own solution, is because often what happens is, if I tell you to do something, Howard, and you don't fully believe in that, or you don't fully resonate with that, you're not going to back yourself 100% of it. You'll always be like, no, that's not me. And Jake mentioned such an important point, and that's what I really think about when I think of myself as a coach. I think of myself as a coach as being the coachee, and we use this word coachee very proudly, even though it might not sound like a very gracious term. Yeah, but the coachee is really the person that is going on this journey, and the coach's role is to be on the sideline and encourage that person along the journey, be their biggest supporter, non-judgmental, and helping them to navigate their journey. And for me, going back to your question, Howard, having to understand that we often play different roles and we have different narratives depending on the role we play is also crucial in our own self-development. So the amazing thing with the coaches, and this is what I found in the sessions, where the coaches were so open to understanding that there was an opportunity for them to grow. Not necessarily they of course they would be helping the coachees, but at the same time they were also going on a journey of self-improvement.
So you're saying here, active listening, helping people find their own solution and making sure that they go on their journey. Would you say those are, as far as you're concerned, the three fundamentals?
Absolutely. I would say that it starts off with, there's always this awkward moment. You have this awkward moment about how do you start a coaching conversation. And we've done a couple of role plays and we've done some scenarios. And the first thing that people come back and say, that was really awkward. We didn't know where to start. And the easiest thing about this, to have this conversation, is ask the question. So as an example, say, Howard, what do you want to discuss today? And that's your invitation to an active listener. And then once you understand exactly where your coachee wants to get, you can then plan, you can put in the systems, you can put in the milestones, you can put in all the necessary, I always call it like a toolbox. You have this toolbox of skills that you can develop, that you can hone in on in order for you to achieve and to reach your goal.
Jake, can I ask you, if I had to ask you for three, you can make it two, you can make it four, but just three as a guideline of the most crucial elements of coaching?
Yeah, so obviously I'm going to back up in terms of listening. I think one of the hardest skills for me to learn, and my wife has told me this over and over, is the skill of listening. Actually keeping your mouth shut while somebody else is giving you their journey, and listening to their journey, not trying to get caught up in your head what you're going to say next. Put that aside and just listen to the person and actually understand where they're at and where they're trying to get to. Another, for me, I think that is paramount, is authenticity. I think it's I think all of us have our personas, we bring to work a particular facade, professionalism, etc. And I think that's, it's a natural part of the human experience. I think within the coaching journey, authenticity is key. When you have a barrier to actually connecting with a fellow human being, it's very hard to help them through their journey. You actually need to get down to their deepest fears, aspirations, and actually help people work through that, because oftentimes those deepest fears are based on a story that they tell themselves. So I would say that leads me on to the next thing that I think is really important, is to try, the listening helps us understand the stories that people are telling themselves. And so many people I've met at Synthesis suffer from imposter syndrome. They feel that they don't deserve to be in the position that they're in. They're not good enough. Everybody else is so fantastic around them. And so part of actually coaching is just to say to them, they're making themselves vulnerable. They're telling you that they don't think they're good enough. It's to actually give them a different perspective, to show them the lens through, or let's say you want to hold up a mirror to the person that you're coaching, and you want to show them the reflection of themselves that you see in the mirror, the potential that they have. And I would say that's an incredibly important part of coaching as well, is to be able to see that potential in others and to be able to bring it out and help others believe in themselves to the same extent that you believe in them.
Yeah, I found a great quote yesterday that I'll share at the end, but it does talk to exactly that. Ian, what does success look like for you in terms of this coaching program and all coaching programs?
Howard, success for me, and it's such an important point that you mentioned, because being successful as a coach is being is different to being successful in almost any other field, because the success you are achieving as a coach is through others, is through seeing others being successful. And what I mean by that is often, and it links to Jake's point about imposter syndrome, is often what will happen is you will walk away from a coaching conversation and you may not have said 2 words in that conversation. And your coachee turns around and says, "Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Jake." And you look at that person and you go, "Why are you thanking me? I didn't do anything." The reality is you've listened. You've given them your undivided or attention. You've actually been there to sometimes just hold their story, because if you hold their story, you're actually showing genuine interest. You're allowing them to trust in you. And I think trust is another thing, in addition to being authentic. Is I often use the example in the coaching about saying, when you say to somebody, "How are you?" be prepared to receive that response and listen, because somebody is going to tell you how they are or how they're feeling. Don't just do it as a courtesy. And the same thing is with coaching, is if you're asking somebody to tell you about their deepest fears, be prepared to listen and be prepared to ask questions and respond. So success for me is not necessarily on winning a race or pushing out the best solution, achieving the biggest awards. Those successes we achieve in other parts of our lives. Success in coaching is seeing the other person become less vulnerable, more courageous, more confident, and be an active contributor to the team as a whole, not because the team is great, but because that person feels great, because they feel that they're an active contributor and they're very self-aware.
Thanks, Ian. Jake, in terms of the synthesis team and this very, very ambitious project that has been evolving and developing and being worked on for some years, what does success look like to you?
So I mentioned earlier on that I try to come up with a model of what we'd like to try and achieve with let's say, try and achieve as an aspirational goal for everybody within the company. And we came out with a concept called the aligned competent team player. And so for me, alignment speaks to the fact that people, you can imagine this picture of all these the magnetic fields. Not all the magnetic fields are parallel. Some are curved. I mean, they're all aligned in some way. So, and I think what I like about that is not everybody's pointing in the same direction, but ultimately we're working towards a common goal. We do have this alignment that actually pulls us together. And I think that's one part of the model. The next part of the model is competence. And that is really, do you have the skills necessary? Do you have the practice necessary? And help people actually achieve those skills or acquire those skills through subsidizing skills learning programs and actually working with them and saying, well, here's an opportunity for you to practice this leadership skill that you've learned about on this project. And then team player, for me, it's very difficult to actually build a team without team players. And this is an insight that I got from Patrick Lencioni in his book, The Ideal Team Player, that you're really trying to bolster and work on 3 virtues. You want people who are humble, they are hungry, they want to do more, achieve more, be more. Humble, why? Because they need to create space for other team members. They need to acknowledge the contribution of others so that other people want to work with them. And ultimately, you need smart. But the smart we're not talking here is IQ smart. We're talking EQ smart, people smart. Do you have an awareness of how you are impacting others? Because if you don't, you're an accidental mess maker. You're not intentionally creating all these messes, but you're doing it anyway. So really, for me, success is actually helping people become aligned, competent team players. And it actually is broader than just the professional world. It's actually a personal world as well, personal journey as well. Because I think when you become effective across all those areas, it spills over to every aspect of one's life. So that's what I would say is success for me.
An incredible program, an incredible initiative. Jake Shepherd, Ian Bessarabia, thank you for this conversation. The quote that I was referring to earlier comes from The Boy, the Mole, and the Horse by Charles Amaxi. And I thought it was absolutely incredible because it speaks to so much of this. And it says, "Sometimes I think you believe in me more than I do," said the boy. "You'll catch up," said the horse. And I love the simplicity of that because that speaks to really what is trying to be achieved here. I'm Howard Feldman. This has been a Synthesis of Podcast. Make sure to subscribe below so that you can be alerted every time one of our podcasts become available. Have a great day. Have a great week. Be kind and God bless.